Welcome to The Explainer. You know how the economy sometimes feels like a total roller coaster? One minute things are soaring and the next, it feels like a stomach-churning drop? Well, today we're going to break down the one concept that explains it all, the business cycle.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with the basics. What even is a business cycle? Then we'll walk through its 4 distinct seasons. We're going to dig into what causes them, how economists try to predict what's coming next, and most importantly, why knowing all this can give you a massive strategic edge. Ready? Let's dive in.
Okay, so to really get a handle on what a business cycle is, I think the best way is to just see it in action, right? Let's look at a couple of real-world examples that show you the two extremes of this whole economic rhythm, the boom and the slowdown. So you've got these two totally opposite situations. One is all about incredible growth and prosperity. The other, well, it's all about decline and a whole lot of uncertainty. That back and forth, that rhythmic fluctuation, that's the business cycle in a nutshell.
And this is super important. A business cycle isn't just random chaos. It's not just things happening for no reason. It's actually a recurring pattern of expansion and then contraction in an economy's overall activity. You can almost think of it as the economy's own natural pulse, its heartbeat.
Now that we know what it is, let's break down the journey itself. It's made up of 4 distinct phases. And honestly, a great way to think about them is like the 4 seasons of an economy.
All right, take a look at this. This diagram is really the key to the whole thing. See that straight line cutting through the middle? That's the long-term trend, where the economy is generally headed over time. But the business cycle? That's the wavy line going up and down around it, rising up into an expansion, hitting that high point, the peak, then falling into a contraction, and bottoming out at the trough before it all starts over again.
So let's start with phase 1, expansion. You might also hear this called a boom. This is the good stuff. Everything is on the up and up. We're talking more jobs, higher output, better profits. People feel confident, they're spending money, businesses are investing. It just feels prosperous.
But you know how it goes. The party can't last forever. Eventually, the economy hits its peak. Think of it as the very top of that roller coaster. The economy is running at full capacity, but things start getting tight. Resources get more expensive, prices creep up, and people start to pump the brakes on spending.
And from that peak, well, there's really only one way to go, and that's down. We enter the contraction phase. You've probably heard this called a recession. Investment starts to pull back, and so does employment. Businesses look around and see they have too much stuff they can't sell, so they cut production. And that creates this domino effect, fewer orders, and sadly, layoffs. The contraction keeps going until it hits rock bottom, and that bottom point is called the trough. This is, without a doubt, the toughest part of the cycle. We're talking high unemployment, businesses failing. It's a really painful time, sometimes even called a depression if it's severe enough. But here's the amazing thing about a cycle. Even at the very bottom in the trough, things start to turn around. Costs for things like labor and materials are low, so some savvy investors see an opportunity. Demand slowly starts to creep back up. Production restarts, people start getting hired again, and boom, a whole new cycle begins.
Okay, so we've seen what the cycle looks like, right? The ups and the downs. But the big question is, why? Why does this even happen? Well, the causes really fall into 2 big buckets. Stuff happening inside the economy and big shocks coming from the outside. This table here breaks it down nicely. On the left, you've got your internal causes. Think of these as things happening within the system, like how much we're all spending, how optimistic businesses feel, or what the government is doing with its policies. And on the right, those are the external shocks. These are the wild cards, things like wars, natural disasters, or some brand new technology that just changes everything overnight.
You know, the famous economist John Maynard Keynes really hit the nail on the head. He argued that a huge part of this is just about total spending, what he called aggregate demand. It's a pretty straightforward idea. When everyone's out there spending money, people and businesses, the economy grows. When we all get nervous and tighten our belts, it shrinks.
So if these cycles are always happening, the million-dollar or maybe billion-dollar question is always, what's next? Where are we going? Well, to figure that out, economists use a set of tools called economic indicators. You can think of them like a doctor checking the economy's vital signs. First up, we have leading indicators. The name kind of says it all, right? They lead the economy. They're like an economic weather forecast. They give us a clue about what's coming down the road. For example, if companies start placing a ton of new orders for goods, that's a pretty good sign that production is about to ramp up soon.
Then you've got coincident indicators. Now, these don't predict the future. They tell you what's happening right now. They move at the same time as the economy. They're like a snapshot, a real-time photo of the economy's health. Think of things like the current GDP, or how much factories are producing today.
And last but not least, we have lagging indicators. These guys are a bit slow to the party. They only change after the economy has already shifted. So what's the point? Well, they're great for confirming what we thought was happening. A classic example is the unemployment rate. It often keeps going up for a little while, even after the economy has already started to recover.
Okay, so this isn't just some boring economic theory, I promise. Understanding all this has huge, real-world consequences, especially for how businesses plan for the future.
Seriously, knowing what part of the cycle we're in is like having a map for the road ahead. It helps companies make those big calls. Should we hire more people? Is now a good time to launch that new product? Or should we save our cash? And hey, this isn't just for big shot CEOs. It can help you make smarter decisions about your own career or your investments. It really is a powerful advantage to have.
Wow, okay. We have covered a ton of ground here, haven't we? We've gone from the 4 economic seasons all the way to the tools economists use to see what's coming. So, let's do a quick wrap-up of the main points, and then I've got a couple of questions to see what you've learned. So, to put a bow on it, first, business cycles are totally normal. They're just the natural ebb and flow of the economy. Second, they have those 4 phases we talked about: expansion, peak, contraction, and trough. Third, they're caused by a whole mix of things, both inside and outside the economy. Fourth, we can keep an eye on them with those different indicators. And finally, the big one. Understanding this whole rhythm is absolutely vital for making smart decisions.
Okay, ready for question number 1? A leading indicator is a variable that tends to...
And the answer is B. You got it. A leading indicator moves in advance of the economy. It's that crystal ball we were talking about, helping us forecast what's coming next.
All right, question 2. Let's think back to that contraction phase, or a recession. What's typically happening to the unemployment rate and to output?
The correct answer is A. This makes sense, right? During a recession, businesses aren't selling as much, so they slow down production, which means output falls. And if they're making less stuff, they unfortunately don't need as many workers, so the unemployment rate rises.
And that leaves us with one final big picture thought to chew on. If these cycles are just a natural, recurring part of how a free market economy works, can we ever really control them? Or is the best we can do just try to manage the ups and downs? It's a huge debate, something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me on The Explainer.